all, it's Charlotte Appleton with the Zari Project. Today's question is, what is the general take of chronic disease in the future of humanity? This question led me into the world of futures studies, which is a multidisciplinary field where experts come together to look at current trends and predict how that might affect humanity in the years and generations to come. I admittedly know very little about this area, so today I'm going to explore it and see what the future impact of chronic disease looks like. I start with the Millennium Project. To frame how I approach this, I examine future propositions and look for the thinking behind them. Why do we think that the future could look like this? As we examine individual concepts, I'm looking for the threads of belief that come back into current beliefs. Current beliefs depend on history. It's the amalgamation of knowledge, facts, and capabilities that we have acquired to this point, then simply projecting them into the future as if looking down a train track that has already been laid. In this way, I use future projections to get a better understanding of what we believe today, and it indicates that we're on very shaky ground to start with. But let's see what they have to say about it. Don't forget to stop by zariproject.com and explore all the resources available pertaining to a future of medicine we can be proud of. Here's the homepage for the Millennium Project, Global Futures Studies and Research. Let's get a little background on futures studies. An internet search brings up futures studies is an interdisciplinary field that examines the future by studying social and technological trends, environmental changes, and how people may live and work in the future. It's a combination of art and science that uses imagination and creativity to explore possible futures. It's rooted in sociology and policy sciences and became an academic discipline in the 1960s. The link to Wikipedia tells us more. Predictive techniques such as forecasting can be applied, but scholars emphasize the importance of systematically exploring alternatives. Back to the Millennium Project, it's a global participatory think tank established in 1996 under the American Council for the United Nations University. It became an independent nonprofit in 2009 and now has 72 nodes, which is a group of institutions and individuals that connect local and global perspectives around the world. Its purpose is to improve humanity's prospects for building a better future. Let's remember that. Mission: to improve thinking about the future and making that thinking available through a variety of media for feedback to accumulate wisdom about the future for better decisions today. I like the word wisdom. That is something that very much makes its way into thinking about problems, but it is not necessarily a scientific quality in today's way of thinking. However, it is absolutely essential when thinking about the future. Wisdom imparts judgment about not just what we can do, but what we should do. Today there are 73 nodes. Many countries are represented here. Let's see what they think is important. The 15 global challenges provide a framework to assess the global and local prospects for humanity. They are the result of continuous research, Delphi studies, interviews, and participation of over 4,000 experts around the world. So presumably these experts are from variable backgrounds, but Delphi studies was a new concept for me. Here's one: National Institute of Health, Delphi Methodology in Healthcare Research, how to decide its appropriateness. Okay, so we got a little bit of a healthcare focus here. The Delphi technique is a systematic process of forecasting using the collective opinion of panel members. Okay, so obviously we're dealing with the future. We are going to be dealing with opinion. We don't have crystal balls, so our prediction skills still depend on experts in certain fields to try to project outcomes in the future. So these global challenges are transnational in nature and transinstitutional and interdisciplinary in solution. We're trying to bring together basically everything we know to try to predict what could be. Here's a nice graphic showing the 15 global challenges identified by the Millennium Project. I don't know if they are in order of importance, but we see a lot of issues around here, ranging from climate change, public health initiatives related to accessing clean water, resources, democratization, global foresight, not exactly sure what that's indicating, AI for everybody, dealing with poverty, health issues, so we're going to come back to this one, education, peace, status of women, dealing with organized crime, energy concerns, science and technology, and global ethics. When we're thinking about health in the future in general, we really can see that underpinning almost everything in here, whether that's a direct or indirect influence. Let's check out health issues. Global Challenge 8. How can the threat of new and re-emerging diseases and immune microorganisms be reduced? Okay, so this is focusing on infectious diseases. In the overview, there have been 4 pandemics in the past 10 years: chikungunya, Zika, H1N1 influenza, and COVID. And it notes that one of the challenges is that without early warning and improved emergency response plans, increasing urbanization, travel, viral mutations, and climate change makes future pandemics inevitable. Well, I would say even without all of those things, future pandemics are inevitable. It's just how nature ebbs and flows. The WHO claims that climate change is the single biggest health threat facing humanity and estimates the world will be short 10 million healthcare workers by 2030. That involves a lot of different conversations. And I'm most curious that climate change is the biggest health threat facing humanity. It didn't even mention chronic disease. Cardiovascular disease causes like half of global deaths. Whatever the relationship that climate change has to chronic disease or health in general, I'm not sure, unless it's going into the idea of mass famines or something along those lines. Let's see if we get any clarity on this. The second part of this statement says that we're running short on healthcare workers. How exactly that ties into emerging diseases, microorganisms, climate change, I just feel like there's a lot of dots being connected here that how they connect is not exactly clear. Here's the connection with climate change and health. As the world continues to warm, animals will migrate, coming into contact with other species and humans, causing new diseases. Hence, there are likely to be more and different pandemics in the future than in the past. So I'm frankly blindsided by this. I was not anticipating a discussion about animal migration as I was looking for a discussion on chronic disease. In fact, when we try to thread climate change back into a discussion on health, they don't actually connect in today's paradigm in any direct fashion. It's not to say they're unrelated, but I see this as a sensational attempt to connect items while avoiding the one that really matters when it comes to health concerns today, which is chronic disease. This taps into a much greater issue that I will explore later. For now, let's proceed. So decentralizing vaccine production on all continents. So this is a general trend in medicine right now, this sort of love affair with vaccines, both for infectious disease and the novelty of it related to chronic diseases, which are not known to have infectious causes. But it is still a very old way of thinking. It's a very blanket approach that stems from the fact that we don't understand disease. Vaccines certainly have their place, but the logistics of them are extraordinary. First, even developing a vaccine. Second, developing a vaccine that is safe for human use. And third, all the logistics of trying to get it to everyone on some recommended schedule. That is not a new problem and not one that simply making more vaccines is going to overcome. It brings in poverty, which is certainly an influencing factor in health, no doubt. The COVID vaccine using mRNA instead of weakened virus might speed development of future vaccines. It doesn't address the logistical issues, let alone getting everyone to accept a vaccine. That's not a new issue. That goes back decades. Making it available doesn't mean that everyone will accept it. Antimicrobial resistance is a problem and projected to become a greater problem. That's largely because we still depend on germ theory, which is an old strategy that we have extended to every possible horizon. And it's not a bad theory, it's just a very simple one. It simply connects a disease-causing agent to a pattern of disease. But it doesn't provide any guidance on intervening on disease, preventing disease, anything like that. That's all an extension of germ theory that it really has no impact. That doesn't make germ theory bad, it just makes it far more limited in scope than what we currently expect of it. This anticipates that artificial intelligence will help create new classes of antibiotics to address this resistance problem. Well, more antibiotics doesn't really address the resistance problem because the microbes will become resistant to that too. They are living, adapting beings. It appears they find ways to promote their own survival. It is also making it easier to make bioweapons which are less expensive than nuclear weapons. This is perplexing. So we're talking about how artificial intelligence can help create new antibiotics as a means to combat disease, but it also conveniently makes bioweapons easier to manufacture. What, just in case you need one? Artificial intelligence is helping to reduce the time it takes to invent new drugs. I'm not surprised. And again, when we're looking into the future, this is saying, well, we anticipate more and more drugs. That's our solution to basically everything with health today. The only other option is to deal with risk factors and behaviors, which is a nightmare in and of itself. Artificial intelligence is also making digital twins of patients to test and improve treatments. Digital twins? We think we can represent a person with a digital ghost and think it's going to accurately predict how a drug is going to interface with that person. I guess this is coming back to this belief that DNA is a crystal ball for all things that are and will be for a human. We treat it as if it's fate, and it's not. It too is a living adaptive system. So if DNA is related to this digital twins concept, all I can say is wow. Here it gets into HIV. Today, 75% of those with HIV are receiving treatment. Compromised immune systems of those with AIDS and those being treated for COVID are vulnerable to deadly fungal infections. What? We know that those with HIV/AIDS are vulnerable to deadly fungal infections, but those treated for COVID? That is news to me. In addition to bacteria and viruses, 300 of the 5 million fungal species cause human disease and kill 1.6 million every year. Never mind that 20 million people die every year of heart disease. Although in development, there are no vaccines against fungal infections. So we started the paragraph with HIV and we ended with needing vaccines for fungal infections. Whew. Embryo gene editing has begun and could eventually eliminate inherited disease tendencies. This could potentially have a role in diseases like sickle cell and glucose 6-phosphate deficiency, both of which cause blood disorders, but those diseases only manifest when a baby receives 2 copies of a dysfunctional gene, one from each parent. Otherwise, if a person inherits 1 copy of that, they're protected from malaria. So there's a natural trade-off to these genes. And when we use Mendelian genetics on a population level, more people benefit from receiving 1 copy of that gene that protects them from malaria than people who are harmed by receiving 2 copies. In a way, it's like nature's drug deal that helps some humans against infections. Is it ideal? No, there's certainly plenty of people with these terrible diseases. But I don't think that gene editing, especially using today's knowledge, is an example of wisdom here. In terms of this gene editing, 2 embryos were edited in China to prevent HIV. We really don't understand what we're getting into here, and genetics is my background, and this makes me very nervous. Hence, it is quite controversial, rightly so. Gets into regenerative medicine that improves functional cells, tissues, extending life, DNA repair, blah, blah, blah. Investment in development of new antibiotics has not kept pace with antibiotic resistance around the world. That's because we've really reached the limits of germ theory. We don't have a functioning theory anymore. It's time to think differently about this problem. This says without new advances, it could lead to more deaths by 2050. And I would say new advances aren't going to prevent that. New thinking might. A universal vaccine to boost the immune system could become an alternative to slow the process of making new vaccines for new versions of diseases. That isn't a future projection. That's not even in the realm of possibility. That is straight fantasy. Genomic vaccines are being tested, not surprised. We got all the way through this and not a single word on chronic disease. The proposed actions to address this global challenge involve a legally binding pandemic accord, public health exercises dealing with pandemics, vaccinations, dealing with antimicrobial resistance, increasing global health funding, telemedicine and AI diagnostics, health technologies. Again, what are we going to do about chronic disease? While I understand that chronic disease is my primary focus and it doesn't mean that everybody else cares about it, when we're talking about the future of humanity, completely ignoring it really is off the mark. I think in some way, dealing with pandemics and emerging infectious diseases is sexy or something. Chronic disease is just a drag. And also really nobody knows what to do about it. And I think that's really what we're doing here is this is directing attention towards things we feel like we can impact. We inject all this technology and all these future capabilities based on technology to make it sound cool, but it doesn't make it real. Let's look elsewhere. State of the Future 20.0. Let's learn more. All right, this is a 500-page whopper with a unique and extensive overview of future issues and opportunities compiled by the Millennium Project. Since I'm not going to pay $49.95 in US dollars for this, let's see what the executive summary offers. Most people alive in 2050 and most babies born today will see the year 2100. Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? Overall, of the 29 variables considered, whatever those may be, the human condition will be better in 2035 than it is today. If we do it right, civilization's future could be quite wonderful far beyond 2035. I agree, but I do not think this is a plan to get there. Skimming through, for health and life-related matters, biologically new growth occurs after natural and human-made disasters. That's when there's a lot of innovations. Trends in synthetic biology can lead to weapons of mass destruction. To prevent this possibility, 3 means could be developed. National technical means, better integration of cognitive science into education and public health to reduce mental illness, and programs for nurturing healthy behavior and preventing actions of such deranged individuals. So this is a sideways approach to saying that mental health is an issue. It touches on poverty, which has a very important role in health. So there's the executive summary and not a word on chronic disease. Now that we've explored a potentially wonderful future in which innovation flourishes after disasters, bioweapons will be easy to manufacture, controlling deranged individuals will be important, and immune boosters will solve everything that's wrong with human health today, let's take a look at the State of the Future Index and see what the takeaway pearls are here. Assessing the impact and the interplay of the different potential developments affecting the future is a difficult and controversial task, true statement, but it is nevertheless valuable and necessary for coherent policymaking. Coherent is an interesting choice of words. Importantly here is the comment that the outlook for the future is based on historical data. Data in and of itself doesn't project futures. Data is interpretation dependent. If the interpretation isn't accurate, then what the data mean is going to be skewed. It comments that this is not a projection. Its role is solely to help identify possible trajectories of its components and the relationship among them, and that these variables ripple throughout the system. That is true, but I actually don't believe this is a possible trajectory. It depends on a science that can't explain life and is dealt with in this future portrait by ignoring that. Down here it lists some limitations, and that we're dealing with computations. So again, we're synthesizing information from the past and trying to project that information in the future with the caveat that what we are doing historically and currently depends on an accurate interpretation, which I don't think it is. Here are the 29 variables that are included in the computation, so at least now we know what they are. The ones that pertain to health include population growth, life expectancy at birth, mortality rate of infants per live birth, current health expenditures per capita, physicians, and those are the main ones of interest here. Let's see what's down here. This graph looks at population growth, annual percentage change based on World Bank data. So we see a general decline in population growth. Presumably that's addressed in a different global challenge. Life expectancy at birth, there's a general upward trend in life expectancy worldwide. This dip here is probably related to the COVID-19 pandemic, which is expected to recover. I agree with that. For now, we've come to a good stopping point, and I'll conclude with some closing remarks. Usually when I make these videos, I do it in one sitting. This one I definitely had to think about as far as implications go. I see 3 main elements at play here. The first is projecting current capabilities and knowledge into the future and what we think that means. The second is a total lack of dealing with chronic disease. And the third is an emphasis on climate change. As far as considering current capabilities, all we see here is an extension of past beliefs into the future. Some may look at this and accept or agree with it, while others reject and feel, frankly, frightened by it. For those who agree with this portrait of the future, all I can say is they are absolutely surfing the current paradigm. They buy into a science that can't explain life, then project those beliefs and capabilities into a future that, quite frankly, is a delusion. These things aren't possible when you don't understand life and disease and don't even entertain the impact that it has either today or in the future. Those who reject or do not like this portrayal, may step back and argue the points using more political or social themes to explain why this is not a desirable future. The truth is, this is not an illogical extension of science shaped by a paradigm that we believe is accurate. If someone is dissatisfied with this portrait, then they sense that something is wrong with the paradigm. However, coming back and looking for solutions within the paradigm is not going to solve the problem. We're all trapped in the same paradigm. The only way to establish a very different future is to recognize that the paradigm doesn't work and to get off this train. This has nothing to do with intelligence, but simply in recognizing that what we believe today about life and disease doesn't work. It itself is more delusion than reality. We don't have to believe that tomorrow must be predetermined by what we believe today. We simply have to change what we believe today. The second matter is no considerations about the future of humanity can avoid the chronic disease problem. Any attempt to do so will create a larger delusion than ever. There's not going to be immune boosters that protect us from all infections or all chronic diseases that exist or have yet to exist. It's simply fantasy. And yet, that is the type of thinking that falls in line with today's paradigm. This is not my idea of futurism. Considering the past and projecting where it's going to go in the future doesn't take intelligence or creativity, but simply logically extending what is already known. Instead, futurism should be about imagining a future we want and then figuring out how to get there. And in this case, it's going to require a different train of thought, a different paradigm to get to a healthy future. The future presented here is not a healthy one. And I would challenge the Millennium Project to revisit its purpose. If it is to improve humanity's prospects for building a better future, well, then create a better future. Rather than feeling tethered to an extension of the past, that doesn't work. The real wisdom today is to step back and start making better decisions today based on an interpretation that actually explain life and disease, rather than thinking that today's opinions somehow serve as a crystal ball of possibilities, because as it stands, this isn't even a real possibility, for better or for worse. Finally, the Millennium Project frames climate change as if it were a symptom of planetary disease attributed to human activity. This is profoundly ironic because it's the same mentality we use to explain human disease. It presumes humans are to Earth as bacteria are to us. In that way, human activity is like an infection or a risk factor of disease to our third rock from the sun. Given that this mentality doesn't work very well to explain disease in humans, why would we presume that it's an effective approach to understanding entities at greater scales? Furthermore, the Earth is not considered living itself as in a living being. Since we can't define what life is, if the Earth is more living than we tend to think today, then we fundamentally lack the context to even understand the meaning of climate change, or whether it's a symptom or not. And if it is a symptom of what? In either case, the Millennium Project is internally consistent here. Its over-reliance on germ theory applies here at the planetary scale. All that to say, considering the health of our planet is important, and there may be pearls of truth in observations about climate change. Unfortunately, we'll never understand what it means in a non-living interpretation that presumes life is an oddity in an otherwise dead universe. While human disease and climate change don't have a very clear connection today, in a living interpretation, they could very well be clearly related. It will look like fantasy, and that's the saddest part. If we have adopted an interpretation that is more fantasy than reality itself, then reality is going to look like the delusion. This is just the beginning of some very interesting conversations that I look forward to pursuing. I hope this video has challenged you to think differently as much as it has challenged me to make it. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave your comments below. See you soon.